The vomit didn't get worse. It was just steady. It was the same.
And difficult as it is to cope with the incessant vomiting, things get even tougher when Brianna develops an alarming new symptom.
Brianna would cry so loud, I thought our neighbors would call the cops on us.
We could hear it throughout the house. It was just this piercing cry.
If she wasn't crying, she looked dazed. She never acted like a normal baby. And I went back to the doctor and I said, this is not working. We need to try something else.
But again, the doctor can find nothing wrong with Brianna. He's confident that she merely has a classic case of colic.
The doctor explained to us that colicky babies tend to cry a lot. They spit up a lot. It will pass after a couple months. I did not want to go back to the house and just listen to her cry and cry and cry. I did not think it was common, but that's what we were told.
Despite their misgivings, Katie and David do their best to put their worries behind them and concentrate on caring for their daughter. Then, one seemingly ordinary morning in late September, they get the shock of their lives.
We went to change Bree one time, and she threw her arms back. She locked up for a couple seconds. She was hard as a rock, almost like you could drop her and she'd break like glass.
I couldn't move her. We were scared to death.
Her eyes bounced all the way back into her head. She looked like a deer that had just got shot, and I knew that was not normal. I had no idea what was going on. I knew something was not right.
We rushed to the ER. We had no idea what was going on with Bree.
And the nurse says she's having a seizure. And they gave her the anti-seizure medication.
As soon as the medical team stabilizes Brianna, they admit her to the hospital for tests.
They decided to run an EEG to see what her brain activity was doing.
The EEG confirms that Brianna is having seizures, but the doctors are unable to pinpoint what's triggering them.
The doctor believed that she could be epileptic.
Epilepsy is a neurological disorder in which individuals experience repeated seizures. Attacks can be sparked by illness, cerebral injury, brain abnormalities, or have no known cause at all.
The doctors told us that an epileptic might have a seizure here and there, and she was prescribed the anti-seizure medication. I never believed she had epilepsy. I never believed it. She threw up too much that I did not believe that that was the reason why.
Frustrated but anxious to help their daughter, the Headings faithfully administer the medication. But over the next 2 months, Brianna only gets worse, and the young couple starts to feel like they're living in a nightmare.
She was still having seizures, still getting worse, still throwing up. She just looked like she was giving up. We went to the ER at least every weekend.
The doctors just increased the medication and told us to keep doing what we were doing.
Every time she had a seizure, I thought that it was affecting her brain and it's going to affect her for the rest of her life.
These first couple months were so rough on us. We were so stressed out. We were physically and mentally exhausted.
But nothing could have prepared them for what happens next.
David and I were sitting on the bed, and he couldn't get her to sleep, so he passed her over to me, and she curled up and locked up, and that was it. She stopped moving. She stopped breathing.
I immediately started giving her CPR.
And I went blank. I could not do anything.
I had to tell her what the number for 911 was. Just a few minutes later, the EMS was there.
We were rushed to the ER, and they wanted to get an IV in. They wanted to get her vitals, monitor her heartbeat, monitor anything that was going on.
Then, suddenly, Brianna plunges into a full-blown seizure.
Her eyes started to bounce in the back of her head, and her body would make like a twitching movement. She would make this noise like she was getting shocked by electricity. It was really hard to watch that. I was really worried I would lose Bree. Really worried.
Nobody seemed like they were doing anything to stop the seizures. A nurse would come by and say a doctor would be by. Nobody ever came. I was furious with the help we were getting. It took everything I had not to lose control.
I would say it lasted anywhere from 6 to 9 hours.
They finally got her seizure to stop by putting an IV directly into her heart.
They just pumped it full of anti-seizure medication.
I thought I was sitting there watching my daughter drift away.
The doctor finally came in and he told us, I believe she has infantile spasms.
Infantile spasms is a type of epilepsy in which a cluster of quick body jerks is followed by stiffening.
The doctor decided that he wanted to put her on a steroid to help with the seizures. I was scared that he wanted to put her on a steroid because she was such a little baby. I believed that we needed to find someone else so we could start over. I wanted new answers, new doctors. I wanted everything to be new, start fresh.
We wanted to get a second opinion.
Determined to get some answers, Katie and David decide to leave immediately for Children's Mercy, a well-regarded hospital 200 miles away.
I was like, we need to go. I will take her myself. And they told me I could not drive her because she was too sick to drive. Children's Mercy sent a helicopter to get Bree.
I ran out to the car and drove to Kansas City, and the whole time I just kept thinking that my daughter's gonna die, and I couldn't get there fast enough.
It's hard to sit there and watch someone you carry for 9 months go through that.
I felt like my life was over. I was completely drained physically and mentally. I thought by the time I made it to Kansas City that I'd be preparing for a funeral.
For 6 agonizing hours, David and Katie Headings have watched their infant daughter endure harrowing seizures that her medical team can't seem to stop. Now, Katie and 10-week-old Brianna are being airlifted to Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City for a second opinion.
I thought Bree was dying. She just looked like she was giving up.
Katie is met in the emergency room by Dr. Robert Cruz, a pediatric neurologist.
Her vital signs were stable, but as we stood at the bedside and watched her, we could see her have seizures. So we arranged to have her admitted to the epilepsy monitoring unit.
He wanted to see what her brain activity was doing.
We looked at the EEG and saw that the pattern was not infantile spasms. That's when we decided we had to be thinking about other things.
Dr. Cruz suspects he might know what's behind Brianna's seizures. To confirm his theory, he gives her a high dose of vitamin B6 while monitoring her brainwaves on the EEG.
We gave 100 milligrams intravenously during the EEG monitoring. We knew if we gave the medication that it would work very quickly within minutes and that we could be fairly confident what the diagnosis was.
We were really hopeful that this was going to be the answer to her prayers.
We gave the medication and we watched the EEG, and we could see the abnormal electrical activity almost go away completely. She stopped having seizures almost immediately.
Brianna's dramatic response to the vitamin B6 confirms Dr. Cruz's theory.
Brianna was diagnosed to have Pyridoxine-Dependent Seizures.
Pyridoxine-Dependent Seizures is a very rare genetic condition that prevents the body from breaking down pyridoxine, or vitamin B6. In a healthy individual, the body converts vitamin B6 into neurotransmitters, which help brain cells send signals to the body. But patients like Brianna can't process enough B6 to keep the brain running smoothly. As a result, muscles receive mixed messages, which ultimately leads to seizures.
Vitamin B6 is a factor that the brain uses to make neurotransmitters, and that's how the brain cells communicate. She can't utilize the vitamin B6 So the brain cells can't send messages to other parts of the body, to move an arm, to move a leg. I don't think anyone really understands why certain parts of the brain have abnormal surges of electrical activity or a seizure at a given time.
I didn't believe Dr. Cruz. I didn't believe that after everything we went through, he's telling me it's a vitamin deficiency.
Your parents thought I was a little bit wacko or something, you know. What's he talking about, a vitamin, some sort of quack?
But as the doctor explains it, Katie and David can see that all of Brianna's symptoms were a direct result of her B6 disorder, starting with the throwing up.
I think children with pyridoxine deficiency have a much, much greater incidence of reflux than healthy children. The brain isn't functioning normally, and so you vomit as part of an instability of the nervous system.
As for the anti-seizure medications Brianna took, even when they worked, it wasn't for long because they never targeted her real problem.
The IV medicines that Brianna received initially have an effect on stabilizing brain cells regardless of the cause. And then gradually they seem to be less effective. Those medicines are sort of stabilizing certain parts of the brain cell, but the parts they're stabilizing isn't the culprit of the problem.
And as long as she went without vitamin B6, Brianna's condition only got worse.
The more abnormal the cells are functioning, and the more they have a tendency to have seizures.
As the Headings begin to understand the true nature of their daughter's disease, one thing is crystal clear. Brianna was diagnosed in the nick of time.
If her seizures wouldn't have been controlled, she would have been a child who pretty much was bedfast, not walking, not talking, and totally dependent upon adults for her care.
I believe that she would have died pretty soon if we didn't get a diagnosis.
Unfortunately, there is no cure for pyridoxine deficiency, but it can be managed. Dr. Cruz will prescribe Brianna huge daily doses of vitamin B6, increasing the amounts as she gets older.
We're not exactly sure how supplementing vitamin B6 works. We presume that if we give extra amounts of the B6, it cranks up the system to work more efficiently.
Remarkably, within a week, all of Brianna's symptoms disappear.
I can't believe that one vitamin would stop everything that she was going through.
Unfortunately, while Brianna's condition is now under control, she may have suffered permanent damage to her brain.
Children with this condition, the most significant negative effect is on language and communication. And she's too young to judge that right now, so we'll have to wait and see.
We are not sure what the lasting effects from having the seizures for 4 months are. They do compare her to kids her age, and that she should be doing this or she should be doing that by now, but I also have to remember what she went through.
Though David and Katie are confident that Brianna will make up lost ground, they can't help but wonder why she had to suffer through weeks of seizures before being diagnosed correctly.
It's my understanding as of 1999, there was about 100 cases reported in the literature.
Since it is so rare, I do understand a little bit that it took a little while to get a diagnosis, but I still believe that doctors should have put the signs together and been able to figure it out.
Today, Brianna is almost 2 years old, and she's starting to meet all her milestones.
I think her prognosis for seizure control is very good. And I think her development is also guardedly optimistic.
I believe that we caught it really early, so she has a good chance to grow up and not have any problems.
In Iraq, I've been shot at, blown up, I've been mortared, rocketed, you name it, and it doesn't even come close to as scared as I was going through what we did with Bree.
She wasn't ready to give up, and I think that that's how she's going to be for the rest of her life.
I love to be able to spend all day with her now. I get to see all these new things that she's doing. I'm glad I'm not missing it.